In this video, let's learn what subjective personal pronouns are. So subjective personal pronouns are pronouns that we use as the subject of a sentence. They essentially are the person or thing doing the action, which is what makes them the subject of the sentence. So I have a nice diagram here that shows you the main subjective personal pronouns. So the main one you're going to be hearing a lot of is I. And I essentially is used when you're talking about yourself. So if you're talking about yourself, I am smart, I am working, I am eating. It's talking about you. You're talking about yourself and what you're doing. Now, if it's a group of people that are talking about themselves, so like one person or more than one person, we use we. We are cooking, we are eating, and so on. And then the other, now I know you can see here is first person, second person, third person. I did create a video about exactly what that is, so go check out that video if you're a bit confused what those things mean. But essentially, first person is when you're talking about yourself, second person is when you're talking directly to someone else, and third person is when you're talking about someone else. But I go into detail in my other videos, so you can check that out. So let's move on to the second subjective personal pronoun. So actually, as I go, let me start with some examples. So let's start with I. So you could say I am, and it's usually followed by am. I am eating. So you're talking about what you're doing, right? I am walking. Okay, and then if it's a group, we can say we are eating. Okay, or we are walking. Okay, so that covers the first person, singular and plural. So just remember, it's when I is when you're talking about yourself, we is when it's a group that's talking about themselves. And then so the second person is when you're talking directly to someone else. So if you're just talking to one person directly, you would say you are smart. If you're talking to a group of people, so if it's plural, you would say you are all smart. Okay, and remember, you is when you're talking directly to someone or you're talking directly to a group of people. Okay, so let's move on to the third person, singular and plural. So third person has a few. When we're talking about singular, we have he, she, it. He is when you're referring to you, typically a male. So he, and remember you always have to capitalize the first letter. He is strong. Let me section these so that they're a bit clear for you. Actually, no, that's not clear. Okay, so let's continue. So he is strong. So it's third person. Remember, third person. So if we're saying he, we're talking about someone else. So we're talking about someone else that's not really, maybe not in the room, not with us. So he is strong, and it's usually referring to a male. Okay, so he is strong, and then if we're referring to a female, it's she is strong. Remember, we always have to have a period on each of these. So don't forget that when you're writing, you always have to have a period. Okay, so she is when we're referring to a female. And then the one that you really need to remember is it. So it is when you're referring to an animal, an object, a place, or an idea. Something that's not necessarily a human. So it's an object, it's a place, it's an idea. So for instance, you could say, it is broken. And you're referring to one thing. Right? So these are singular that we're talking about. Or you could say, it is raining. Okay, so this is third person. And then when we're talking about plural third person is they. So we're talking about maybe a group of people, more than one person, animal, object, or thing. So we can say they are playing or if we're talking about maybe something that we're going to buy, they are expensive. Okay, so these are third person plural. Okay, so remember, so these are plural third person. We're talking about someone or something else. And then it is when you're talking about a thing, a thing, an animal, an object. It's not a person. So remember, it doesn't refer to a person, it refers to a thing, a place, an idea. And then remember, he, she is, when we're talking about he is usually a male, she is usually a female. Okay, and use when you're talking directly to someone or a group of people, if it's plural. And then we is first person when we're talking about a group talking about themselves. And then I is when you're talking about yourself. So I am eating, I am walking. Okay, so let's do a short quiz to see if you remember. So let me go to the next page. Okay, so let's start with quiz 1. Okay, so I'm just going to put a space, and that's where you have to answer. So, I'm hungry. What do you think you would put here in the space? So take a second, pause the video, and think about that. Okay, so remember we would put the first person singular. I am hungry. We're talking about ourselves, right? And remember, this is the subject. So you are the subject. I am hungry. That's what the subjective personal pronouns are. So you're talking about yourself and you are the subject. You're the center of the attention. Okay, so let's do another quiz. So let's do quiz 2. What would you put there? So in this case, we're using you. Remember, this is second person. So you're talking directly to someone else. So it's still the subject. So it's a subjective personal pronoun, but you're talking directly to someone else. You're telling someone that you are my friend. Okay. All right, so let's go on quiz 3. So in this case, I'm going to make it a bit different. So I'm going to say John is playing soccer. So which pronoun would you use to replace John? So typically, remember, we're going to be using the third personal pronoun, third person subjective personal pronoun, because remember, John in this sentence itself is the subject, right? He's the one who's doing the action. He's the one who's playing. So I think I just gave you a clue to what pronoun you might use. So John is typically a male name, so we would use the third personal pronoun. He is playing soccer, right? So we're using he because typically John is a male name, and since we're talking about John, we consider that the third person subjective personal pronoun, since he's the one doing the playing. Okay, let's do another quiz. Maria is studying. What pronoun would you use to replace Maria? So you have a clue from the last question that I just asked. So try to use that to find the answer. Remember, you can always pause the video. Okay, so in this case, since we're talking about Maria, Maria is the subject. Remember, it would be third person because we're talking about Maria, and Maria is the subject. She's the one doing the studying. The pronoun we use to replace her is she is studying, because she is the pronoun that we use typically for female, and it's third person because we're talking about Maria. Okay, so let's go to quiz 5. The phone is broken. What pronoun would you use to replace the phone, or the phone specifically? So remember, I'm not talking directly to someone, I'm not talking about myself, so it has to be third person because we're talking about the phone. And remember, a phone is not a person, so what pronoun? It would be it is broken. Now you can see in this case we get rid of the article they, so we don't need that. We cover it completely with just it. So it is broken, and it's third person, and it's the subject that we're talking about because it's the thing that's being broken, right? So I hope you got that right. Let's do 2 more. So my brother and I are tired. Space, are going home. What pronoun would you put here in this space? Okay, so if you took some time, now read the whole sentence, you can see that we're talking about more than one person, and it's essentially we're talking about ourselves, but it's not just one person. So my brother and I are tired, therefore we would say we, because it's more than one person. And it's first person because we're talking about ourselves. So we are going home. So that's a pronoun that you put there. Okay, last quiz. So quiz 7. The children are playing. Okay, so take a second and think about the pronoun that we would use to replace the children. And remember, we're using subjective personal pronouns, okay? Okay, so in this case, we would use, since we're talking about a group of people or children, we're going to use the pronoun they. And remember, it's third person. They are playing because it's a group of people. And they are the subject because they're the ones that are doing the playing. And it's more than one person, so we use pronoun third person, subjective personal pronoun. So they are playing. All right, so I hope you understood what subjective personal pronouns are. You can go through these quizzes, pause the video, test yourself, make sure you get it correct. Again, let's go back to the definition. Subjective personal pronouns are pronouns used as the subject. So they're the person or thing doing the action. And typically the subject usually comes as the first word in a sentence. Not always, as we saw in the last one, but I'll give you tricks in other videos on how to find the subject, because the subject is the one doing the action. It's the one doing whatever thing is going on. Okay, so I hope this was clear. If anything was not clear, please leave a question in the comments. I'll be able to answer those as quickly as I can. And if this was helpful to you and made it clear, please subscribe, like the video, and share.